Welcome to the NIA, another podcast, another day. This week I'm joined by Al. He knows about comics and he's a pal. But off to Nuttwood we must go. Yes, it's time to open the show. Welcome back to Never Mind Anything Comics Review Podcast. This week we're back to our more regular programming, a deep dive into a comic subject. I'm joined on the top board by the gentleman and artist, the Duke of the Black and White. Welcome back, Alan Henderson. How you doing, man?
Thanks. Long time. It has been a long time since
it's like January, I think, isn't it? I reckon.
We've been both of us having extensive work activities and various personal things that
I've been boring you with text messages that are still coming in, but it's been right. How are you anyway? How's it going?
Doing absolutely great.
You're half the man you were, Al. I've got to tell you, man.
Well, depending on how you want to do the numbers, for those in Europe, it's 35 kilograms.
Good
for
man.
Those in the UK, it's 5.5 stone.
Oh, nice.
1,000 pounds in for America. In terms of what I've dropped over the last year, and it's now all about toning and just being healthy.
Yeah.
But as I was saying to you, that's it's a big time thief.
And it just, man, yeah. We've talked about it before because I dropped 4 a couple of years ago, and it does make you feel better. You know what I mean? But you're right. Trying to running 3 miles every morning, it does. It removes the time at the end of the day for me sometimes because I feel more knackered when I get to the end of the day. But I know what you mean.
But so now it's been good from that sort of side of things, and then I had a small incident with regard to a flood inside the house, which meant I got to move everything about. Luckily, nothing was damaged.
Oh, good man.
But, it then cost me to pause a long period of time because taking everything off the shelves to put them all back on the shelves again meant I got to look at everything. Yeah,
we even started a channel on the Slack, didn't we? So you could show us. Well, we need to get back on that, don't we? We need to bully someone else to do it now. Yeah.
Just all these weird and wonderful things you find when you go, oh, I forgot I had one of these.
Oh, man. And that does travel into what we're talking about tonight because it was... I won't say what it is yet, but it's a massive nostalgia hit for us. At your suggestion. So do you want to tell the listeners what you've suggested for tonight?
Sure. On this pod, we've been known to discuss a bit of comic history, but I've suggested a character who, to us, is somewhat of a mystery. This is despite having stories aplenty, given they were first published in 1920. Originally in a newspaper every day, more people know his annuals, I would say. Quintessentially English, but known here and there. Tonight, we're discussing Rupert Bear.
Brilliant. Brilliant bit of rhyming. There you go. Rupert Bear. Wrongly known as Rupert the Bear, although we might get into why that is shortly. And I'm going to say, just as a little opener, kind of for the strict people amongst us, strictly not comics or strictly comics? How do you feel?
Well, I was going to say it's part of this whole thing about what is the definition of a comic. So I would say that if you say that a comic is the combination of words and pictures to transfer a story across, then this is a comic. It's just not necessarily in a format that we're used to in the current parlance. Yeah. Because the structure that it has still very much follows the 1920s structure of having a picture with words underneath, rather than actually having any sort of word balloons built into the actual imagery. So I would say it is a comic book,
cool.
Or certainly it's a comic strip that then becomes transferred into a comic book. And as part of it being transferred into the comic book, we probably need to define what an annual is for the actual transference of the comic book actually expands it further, and it does start to bridge the gap between saying where does a comic stop and an illustrated book begin. Yeah, because I think there's a weird balance there.
Yeah, so it's weirdly formatted. Oh, not weirdly. We look back at it and it's very differently formatted to what perhaps most comic, manga, picture book people are used to. There is a combination between a picture book and a comic somewhere. It's almost readable on 3 levels. So for those that haven't seen it, generally now it has changed format a number of times. It has an image underneath a rhyming couplet and underneath that a description. Is that right, do you think? Is that a good way of putting it?
Yes. And again, I think there's what appears in the newspaper,
Yeah,
and then what appears ultimately being collected.
yeah,
And in terms of the structure of that, I think if you go all the way back to the Looking Glass and the original, the very, what is the very first comic book and all that sort of stuff, the very first comic.
yeah,
Um, this very much follows that premise of saying picture, words underneath, and then perhaps more of a description that comes with it to say here's the whole narrative.
yeah,
All of which, as I say, it goes out daily in a newspaper, the Daily Express, and in that it normally goes out as 2 images.
yeah,
But when it's then collected together on an annual basis, it comes into a hardback book that is, well, now probably just slightly larger than the A4. A couple of the ones I've got in front of me from the 1970s are sort of smaller, so actually near American comic book size,
okay,
oddly enough, in terms of their piece. And it's a hardback book that must be, actually, this one will tell me, about 120 pages long, collecting that year's worth of stories essentially into one place, with a number of sort of mini games and puzzles as well.
yeah, and still coming out now. So we're going to get a bit onto the history in it, but what I think I'd like to do first is perhaps investigate your history with it, or our history with it. So how were you first exposed to it, Al?
So I would have been first exposed in 2 ways. One is I distinctly remember getting this book, or getting these books, Rupert books, in the mid-70s, which was, let's say, between the ages of 4 and 8 years old in terms of that piece.
Yeah.
In terms of what I distinctly remember that. And one of the ones that I've had to pick up off eBay for the purpose of this is from the 1970s, or copyrighted 1976. And I have an exact memory of the some of the images that appear in that book. And it's very much a case of I would have received that probably from my grandparents at Christmas. Getting a Rupert book just became part of the family. It's part of most people in Britain's family folklore, I would have said, from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, very much so. I was speaking to a buddy of mine at work who I think is in his mid-60s this morning, and he was saying that's his childhood, man. He remembers them so vividly. But it's something we don't ever... I certainly haven't thought about much.
No. Yeah. So that would be my exposure to that. And also in the late 70s, there was a cartoon series that appeared. So that is, again, something that would have just been part of my general childhood.
Yeah.
Now, like you, I then compartmentalized that and put it away and said that was part of my childhood. What's amazed me as part of the research for this is, and I struggle to find this for anything else, there has been an Rupert annual published every year since 1936.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Every year.
Yeah. And the Americans struggle having a 20-issue run these days. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, during lockdown, one of the let's get silly with eBay type things, I started collecting the Batman annuals from the British annuals from Batman.
Yeah.
There's big gaps in that in the mid-90s and stuff. And so, like, it goes 81, 82, 84, and then there's nothing till 87 or whatever.
Maybe you're telling me about this. Yeah.
That has gaps in it. Well, Rupert has had an actual annual out every year since 1936. Now, sometimes, yes, it repeats, and there's...
Even during the war, as I understand it, didn't it? It even kept going during wartime, during the paper shortage. Right. Yeah.
So it's... And again, it's been part of that piece of just being... It is core to British culture in terms of the piece there. And that, I think, then, you're saying, again, what's my exposure to it? It becomes so commonplace and so accepted as just a general character that it can then be played upon and parodied and slotted in. And you just go,
It's an immediate icon, isn't it? It's like that iconography theory about when you see a Batman signal, you don't think the word Batman, everything hits you in the eyeballs. Yeah. For me, it was, like you, I think... What am I, like 4 years older? 4 or 5, aren't I, than you? Years older. So I was of a similar age to you when I was getting them. Slightly before that, I guess, early 70s. I had a Rupert Bear teddy bear when I was a kid, which I had forgotten about until like a week into the research for this. And also, I have a vague memory of seeing a Christmas Rupert Bear play in London somewhere.
Right.
I don't know where, because I was taken by a grandparent who's long passed away. But I remember a flying car and stuff like that. Yeah. So definitely, we were talking about it earlier when we were throwing the theme tune, the now famous Rupert the Bear theme tune about, and like I guess it was like being punched in the face with, oh my God, I remember all this now.
It just draws you back in, and
Doesn't it?
It's the silliest things as well.
Yeah.
That a yellow scarf that is checked, and you have to say to anyone,
that was like an impulse buy. I was looking at Rupert Bear stuff online, and I saw that they sell scarves, and they weren't particularly expensive. I thought, oh fuck it, I'm going to send Alan one. That would just make me laugh. And I remember literally laughing to myself in my office on my own, pressing buy on the website for that scarf. Yeah, just made me laugh.
well, as I said, and then it arrived here. But it's that whole classic thing with when an Amazon parcel arrives that you're not expecting, and you go, "What's
this?" Yeah.
Oh no! Oh my goodness! I mean, it's that again. Without even any context, everybody knows exactly what it is, and it's been in my background of my Teams channel thing for when I've been on work and stuff. And a couple of people have gone, "Have you got a Rupert scarf?"
Yeah.
And again, it fits that thing of people just going, "I know exactly what that is." It drags me in, and it makes me a child again.
Yeah. And sadly, a man who has just had a drink thrown in his face was spotted wearing Rupert Bear trousers earlier this week by your good self, which is something of a shame. Yeah. Come on.
But it was just Anyway, but
let's get a bit into the history, Al, if you don't mind. So Rupert, I'm going to call him that other famous UK bear. First appeared in the newspaper, the Daily Express, on the 8th of November 1920. So about 103 and a half years ago. And as you say, every year since 1936 has been an annual. So whilst Alfred Bestell is stamped out as the artist that everyone remembers on Rupert, he isn't the creator. That honour goes to Mary Tourtel, who was like this really famous person. Her husband was the night editor at the Daily Express, and they needed some competition for a strip that was going on in the Mail called Terry Tales, the story of a mouse. There's a theme here, Al, I've got to tell you. Yeah. So he contacted her. She was something of an artist, and they created Rupert. He actually writes a lot of the captions. His name was Herbert. And I don't think he's credited enough for that, because if you look at the creation of Rupert online, it's nearly always her, but he did definitely have a hand in it. She was an incredible woman. She was not only this artist, that her and him sort of almost like kind of refused to live in houses. They would live in hotels and travel about. They both hold a record for flying a biplane from England to Belgium in record time at that time. And she also worked on Humpty Dumpty, Billy Rabbit, and the Three Little Foxes. And she gave it up. There's a plaque actually where they used to live in Ivy Lane in Canterbury, where she spent her final days. She gave it up when her eyesight began to fade, and she couldn't keep up with it. And it was taken over by Alfred Bestell, who was born in Mandalay in Burma, believe it or not. And he was the son of a Methodist missionary and educated in North Wales. He somehow convinced his father to study art, first in Birmingham and then in London. And he was actually, before Rupert, he'd worked in Punch and a couple of other things. So he was actually quite a well-known cartoonist at the time. And he is credited as really taking on Mary's style, but adding a much more of a sort of richness to it, I understand. Is that a good description, would you say, Al?
Yeah, I think he puts extra layers into the background in terms of the sort of depth of the overall image.
Yeah.
And the ability to turn around and say, there's just a little bit more to it. Again, you know exactly who everybody is within it, though, and all that sort of stuff. It just builds it up more. And then it's become, everything after that has become this sort of take on, and I guess maybe this is why I think, because you and I, again, we're talking about this earlier, where I see he's a character that was created in the 1920s, but for a lot of it, I feel that it looks and feels 1950s.
Yeah, I think
And if you
because we
actually look
grew
at
up on
when,
those sort of
yeah,
films about tearaway kids, and you know, I think
but
I
that's
don't.
also when Bestell was doing the most work on this. Is
Yeah,
that
that's true. Yeah,
that's probably why it's become ingrained as that is the biggest part of it.
there's an
Uh,
interesting fact about Bestell where there's a 4-part documentary you can find on YouTube with Terry Jones, and Terry Jones is this massive. Terry Jones from Monty Python is a massive fan in it, and he used to read it to his kids, and he ends up interviewing Bestell in his cottage in North Wales. And Bestell's a very quiet man, very self-effacing, very sort of practical. And he says to him, "Why didn't you sign your why didn't you sign your art? I could when I was a kid, I could never work out who it was who was creating the art on this. Did you see this out, by the way?"
no, I didn't see that bit. No.
Okay. And he says, "Well, I liked Mary's stuff so much, and she was ill, and I didn't want the credit to be taken away from her, and I only decided to sign it well after she passed away." I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? What a
And
nice
that
guy.
Yeah, and that actually continues through into some of the later artists as well, who don't sign the interior art of the annuals, if you like.
Right.
It's only the cover.
Oh, okay.
So it's certainly the case for QB and for the Harrod ones that come slightly later. They seem to only sign the cover artwork, and not the actual the the pen and ink or the watercolor interiors.
Okay. Yeah, there's some amazing spreads, aren't there? And it tends to be like you say, like the inside front cover and stuff like that. There's these massive landscapes and trees and castles and magical lands, and that's beautiful stuff, isn't it? He's always in a spaceship or something, isn't he, Rupert?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Or actually, so I just flicked open the 1974 version that is in front of me, and he's actually in a gyrocopter, which actually links him straight to the shadow, which is quite. I hadn't even thought of that.
All right. Did you want to talk a little bit about what Rupert is, before we
Yeah.
crack on a bit? So what? I mean, he's a boy, isn't he? Basically, is that a good description?
So, yeah, Rupert Bear is the son of Mr. and Mrs. Bear. This is where we need to get. He's not Rupert the Bear. He literally is Rupert Bear because his mother and father are
That's his
Mr.
last name. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he lives in Nuttwood and with a lot of his friends. And it's basically about the adventures of him as this 8-year-old type kid.
Yeah.
But he gets involved in all sorts of fantasy and magical and just experiences of just having engaging with other people, and it's all about his goodness of how he goes around helping people and how he goes around just doing the right thing at the right time to try and sort things out, and
Yeah.
just be generally nice with all these things. This was part of my reason for saying to you that we should talk about this. One, because of the history of it, but also, you're wanting to do all these outlaw comics, and I'm like, what's the least outlaw character I could come up with?
Well, we were saying this, weren't we, earlier? Because the last one you and I did was Longbow Hunters, which is, which has rape as a theme in it,
And
or
this
not
is,
rape, as we found out it wasn't.
yeah.
But yeah, this
But
is the opposite.
but this is all just about him going out and having adventures. Now, you could argue that all this fantasy and the magic and all this sort of stuff is him just going, oh, I found a key.
Yeah,
It's exciting. Let's go do something with it. And the going around and having to say, well, what does it fit? And but that then has a story that says, oh, I'm getting on a raft and I'm going to go visit an island and I'm going to go with my friends.
yeah. They
To
really take
get
chances. Bear in mind, this is the period they didn't have mobile phones. Plus, he's always getting kidnapped by someone, isn't he? There's a sort of theme. He's always like being captured by pirates or wizards or something.
meeting, it's all right. I've met somebody on the beach. Well, I'll call them. They're going to be a were person, a mare person, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And oh, the white horses in the sea really are horses, and we can, and then I'll go off and I'll meet a nymph in the woods, and then there'll be an ice thing, and it just goes on and on. Where you're like going, so some of this is just so surreal, but it's so soft and childlike. that you're
You
left going,
accept the logic, don't you? You're just carried through with this very strange, almost like Vertigo-esque logic in it, aren't you?
oh, we'll come back to that.
Yeah,
The So yeah, so that's kind of the basis of it is just it's that some really just a child's adventure and the ability to have the imagination to say the things in front of me, I'm going to interpret them as being just magical. And I'm sure there is a piece of that where you're like going, you know what, he's found a shopping trolley. And that shopping, trolley is suddenly a magical car that can spin around and do all these wonderful things. But in
yeah,
reality, all he's done is find a shopping trolley. And maybe that's what we were like in the 1970s or on the 60s and 50s, whatever you were reading this, where it was a case of you made adventure out of the things that you were just doing
yeah.
in this
The
when
stick
you
you found or something like that. Yeah, yeah,
it wasn't a case of that you had an iPad that had everything in front of you. You had to just go have an adventure.
yeah. And I like to think we're almost the last generation for that, aren't we, Al? We truly believed we'd find stick of the dump in the woods and stuff like
Well,
that. Every stick
it
was
is
a
that
machine
whole,
gun, and
it is that whole, if you find a stick of a certain shape and you don't say it's a gun, or you don't say I'm going to make it into a sword,
yeah,
then what, I'm really disappointed in you type thing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and it is that whole, well, just
Well,
it's much like Lego today, right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good
Today,
comparison.
everything has to be set to making a very specific thing. When I was a kid, you bought Lego and it was just all shapes and sizes, and you put it together and you made a thing, and you just said, "This is what the thing is," and you just imagined all the bits that were missing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or you just in your head you rounded off the square corners. And there's a lot of Rupert is just like that, of going, just imagine yourself having fun and going off and having an adventure. And as I say, he then, so he is a boy essentially, but he's a bear.
a bear in a jumper and trousers. Although he does wear trainers now, as I understand it, in the new
Yeah,
cartoon,
that,
doesn't he?
but
Yeah,
that's I have that I can, and
I don't
he's
mind.
got a
Yeah,
knapsack and off he goes. And he's got friends, he's like Bill Badger,
I
Albert
think Bill's
Pug.
the most common one, isn't he? I think
Yeah,
Bill's his main
they are
friend, isn't he?
his
Yeah,
probably his closest friend. He also deals a lot, and then they all have their own things about,
he's a bit like
Bill's
you. He
another,
doesn't shy away from a bow tie. His friends, do they? Do you know what I
no,
mean?
but again, yeah, yeah. And the weird thing is they're all the same sort of height, but the fact that, one of them was an elephant, Edward Trunk,
Yeah, one's a
who,
mouse. Yeah,
and they're all the same size. But the weird thing is they then interact with non-anamorphic humans as well.
yeah,
Whether it's a particular professor or Tiger Lily, who's the Chinese conjurer's daughter. He's got the various other ones that he gets interacting with that he just meets people he just meets in the as part of his journeys.
yeah.
And they so there is this weird mix of going, is it anamorphic or is it somebody who is living their life. And it creates a very really interesting mix of activities that come with it.
It's interesting, Al, because if you listen to Bestell talk, when he went in to supply his, to basically say this is my portfolio, they were looking for someone to take over on Rupert. They'd already thrown it about in the office to see who could write some, and everyone had said nah. Like everyone in the Express said, "No, I can't do that. I'm too busy, or it's not my thing, or whatever." And so they said to Bestell, "Could you write it?" And he went, "Well, I'll give it a go." And he reckoned he'd have about 2 weeks worth of stories before he dried up. But this stuff just kept coming, didn't it? He's in a hot air balloon the following week. He's in what's one of our favourite ones, the Land of Chalk.
Well, yeah,
That,
which again, so I used the word surreal earlier, and this is where I think you can just go as mad as you want with this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, he's good, he finds the chalk and he goes into the chalk land where everybody's two-dimensional, but he's three-dimensional, and he goes in with Bill, and they're it's how do they get out of that two-dimensional world where everyone's in black and white as well. And good. That's properly out there in terms of the construct. There's the Toyland storyline as well, where all the toys come to life, and it's like things like chess pieces are coming to
Right.
life,
Yeah.
and he's chasing around by them, and it's a bit Alice in Wonderland because he also keeps changing size and stuff. But again,
Right.
you're like going, there's a degree of going, wait, this literally is keep going, pushing out to say how mad do you want to be? in terms of
Yeah.
the concepts here. Um,
And it's a bit
which
like Kirby in that respect, isn't it? These are not dudes who are doing lots of LSD, but you know someone somewhere must be going, God, these dudes must be doing a lot of acid, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and Bestell couldn't be anything more than he's the absolute opposite of that. He's a dude who I can imagine would sit there with a tie on, you
oh,
know,
100%.
drawing.
To
Yeah,
do this drawing, man. He sat there and proper old school things. I mean, and don't get me wrong, the whole place, as I say, is Nuttwood's where the storylines are generally set, or that's his home, which is to me, it feels like the Lake District, but it's
yeah.
probably, it has that sort of, rolling hills, but nothing too
He
serious.
refused to be drawn on it, didn't he? Apparently,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of talk about it being Sussex. There's a lot of talk about it being North Wales. But I think he liked to leave it because it let every kid think it was their field next to their house, or the one at the end of the bus ride from there, where they lived in a town and stuff like that. I think he
And
refused to be drawn there. Yeah,
and that, yeah, but I say it just, and it feels that very gentle. Go watch Miss Marple and go, all right, these are all saying this, it
yeah,
feels like Midsummer Murders, but with set in the
yeah,
1950s, and then going, but by the way, everybody's, half of them are anamorphics,
yeah. And there's a
the
submarine
policeman
suddenly in
the
the river,
policeman
and
is a
yeah,
big dog wearing a
yeah,
policeman's outfit and things like that, and walks upright and all this sort of stuff.
yeah.
I mean, don't know, this is an absolute furry's dream, I must
Oh,
admit.
that's true. Never thought of it that way. God, it is, isn't it? It's
So
like
it's
formative
just when I turned the
furry.
page there and saw the tail sticking out of the policeman's uniform.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my God. How much are we subverting the innocence of this?
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was the other thing. What I will say is, if anyone ever wants a list of potential titles for a pornographic series, Rupert Little Bear library books, the titles for those books from the
Oh no.
1920s,
Right.
where it's Rupert and the Enchanted Princess, Rupert and the Black Dwarf, Rupert and his pet monkey, Rupert and the Three Robots,
Oh, I
etc.,
like the
etc.
robot one.
And
Yeah.
and you're like going, okay, where does it go with all this? You're like, and
Well,
you could, yeah. Anyway,
let's move on to that
yeah.
subject. So, so from the two Ronnies to
Mm,
what we're about to talk about, Oz magazine. Rupert pops up in a lot of places, but perhaps most controversial it is in that issue of Oz magazine, issue 28 from May 1970.
yeah.
And it's a scandal that involves the first of the Beatles we're going to talk about in this. Another Beatle will come up shortly. But it was, so those that don't know, Oz magazine was what it suggests, is suggesting the title of the magazine that was imported from Australia. They ended up then, it has a close relationship with London. The editors then moved to London and opened a London branch. This issue invited teenagers to edit it, if you can believe it. And it had, as you would understand it has rants about school teachers and a piece on the Kent State Massacre. But it was a teenager called Vivian Berger who had pasted the head of Rupert on the body of a Crumb character from Big Ass Comics issue 1, Eggs Ackley Among the Vulture Demonesses. And he'd done more than just paste the head of Rupert onto this character, because there's sort of colours and
Yeah.
movement and stuff that appears in it. But it's a pornographic comic it's a typical Crumb. Go back to our Crumb episode and listen to that. Rupert has a massive penis and penetrates this oversized woman who's laying on the floor. And for those that have the issue, it's pages 14 and 15. The Obscene Publications squad raided Oz's offices under a warrant and arrested them for the common law offence of conspiracy to corrupt public morals. Now, the kid, Vivian Berger, wasn't arrested because it was considered he was too young. And what happened is it resulted in the longest trial at the time of its kind. John Leonard had suffered a serious raid around that time over a similar raid around that time around an art show of his and Yoko's. So he threw himself into raising money for the defence, along with, get these names, David Hockney, Robert Crumb, Yoko Ono, Terry Gilliam, Gerald Scarfe, Ralph Steadman and Andy Warhol, and quite a few other people. And they made a massive paper mache model of Crumb's Honey Bunch Kaminsky that would appear outside the court during the trial. Mary Whitehouse actually took a copy of Oz magazine. She got given a meeting with the Pope, and she showed it to the Pope, believe it or not. John Mortimer, who's
Yes.
he's famous for the Rumpole of the Bailey books and TV series. He's a barrister, and he defended them. And they were eventually found guilty. They spent a short amount of time in prison and eventually overturned their conviction. There's a really interesting book on the Oz trial, which is a transcript which I sent you a page from. Even the judge says the most ridiculous things in it. For the comic heads who listen to this, other people who had appeared in Oz were Brian Talbot, Dave Gibbons, Gilbert Shelton, and Brian Bolland. So it has quite the artistic history to it. There's a film, believe it. Have you heard there's a film with Hugh Grant? Did you know this?
Yes. Well, yeah.
The Trials of Oz is a TV movie before Grant hit big. From 1991 in BBC Two TV movie, and I can't find it anywhere. I've looked for it in all the usual places, and I can't find it anywhere.
I mean, it's one of these ones. If you can find it, it's actually very easy to find the Rupert story online. It's
isn't it?
I mean, I know that when we discussed Crumb, Eamon's skin crawled. If he was to read this, his skin would be crawling again because it's pretty hardcore in terms of what's there. And but I think there is something about taking the most innocent thing and mixing it with something that really is far away, the least is something possible type thing.
Yeah.
And saying, right, that only works because everybody knows who Rupert is.
Yes, exactly.
And going, I know where the starting point is from it. Because even when the two Ronnies did their sketch of it, they were, it was a little bit close to the bone, some of the stuff they were coming up with, to the extent that they were always, a little bit double entendre type thing. And that is that whole sort of, and it's easy to do when you've got rhyming couplets as your main way of presenting things, because you can start off with saying, well, he's here to show his luck.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that he. And if you go with the two Ronnies type sketch, so there's a lot that comes in with that in terms of how it comes together. But again, I think it does show that it's the character is embedded within the psyche of the UK.
Yeah.
The cartoon has gone worldwide and all sorts of stuff, but I don't think it has the same transference beyond that. It does feel very British in terms of that context.
Yeah, I found a little transcript of the trials. So Leary, who was one of the defendants, has said it describes Berger as the artist as a genius. Leary was the judge, and Leary says, "Where lies the genius?" And Anderson says, "I think it's in the juxtaposition of the two ideas, the childhood symbol of innocence." And Leary has said, "What? Making Rupert the Bear fuck?" Jesus. Well, I see both their points. I'll be honest with you. Yeah. Okay. Let's limit calling people genius sometimes, but perhaps they shouldn't have been on trial. That's kind of where I sit on that one. Yeah.
I mean, it would still be frowned upon today because it's gone so far, but it would not be that. It wouldn't. There wouldn't be a trial about it. Yeah. There's worse out there to be found, but it's.
Yeah. And it's you can find it. There's a book called Trials of Oz by Tony Palmer. You can still get it on eBay quite cheaply. I bought it at a book fair for like £4. It's an account and a transcript of a lot of what went on in the trial, and it deals a lot with the Rupert scandal, which was at the centerpiece for everything involved in this trial, really. Yep. Okay. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about the nicer end of Rupert exploitation, as I like to refer to it.
Yeah.
Rupert and the Frog Song.
So, you've mentioned Lennon as being sort of related to Rupert in this context of Oz, but he's not the only Beatle connected to.
Yeah, how weird is that? Yeah.
So yes, Paul McCartney,
and both the way that excuse me for interrupting, but the way they're associated with them is very much in line with how I feel about both their personalities. Does that make sense? You got that eternal rebel, kicker against the doors of society, Lennon, and you've got someone clearly trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah, but the weird thing is, the Frog Chorus, which was a hit for Paul McCartney in the mid '80s, and it was a big hit because one-hit wonders were still a big thing at that point in time.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on Top of the Pops, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I'll let people Google YouTube or for to actually find the actual track rather than me sing it to them just now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I thought you were going
but
to go into a bum, bum, bum. Yeah, I thought you.
yeah,
Yes, it's so catchy though. It is genuinely a really good catchy song. Yeah, okay.
again, and to be honest, again, it's another one of these things. There was something that came up the other night there about, and again, this relates to the two Ronnie's discussions about. There are certain things that have to happen in your life, depending on where you were. You will always say, so if you go boom, 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 everyone from our age group will go aye, aye.
Yeah,
In the same
definitely.
way that if I say, if you meet somebody in the office who happens to be called Timothy, or if somebody swears in the office,
Yeah,
the first thing that everybody says is language, Timothy.
I know.
You
We're
know,
so stuck in that age, aren't we? Sometimes
and
I think. Yeah.
it's you just have to, what is your things that hook you into things. So anyway, as part of the Frog Chorus, the video is Paul McCartney in an animated setting where it's all about Rupert meeting all these frogs,
Yeah.
and that's bizarre for that.
But it
And I was
opens with McCartney himself, doesn't it?
mm,
So the video opens with him going through. He opens a chest, and in it, I couldn't make out the names of the comics. I went backwards and forwards and on it. But there's in this trunk is a Rupert annual, and behind him is a Rupert teddy
yeah,
bear, as it were. Yeah. Then we throw ourselves into this animated feature, which I think was 16 minutes long, something like that
whatever
initially.
that,
Yeah.
from 1984. There you go.
There you go.
2030.
Yeah.
30 minutes long in terms of the total thing, but it's
Okay.
and Rupert appears on the front cover of the CD of the CD 84 of the 7 inch. There you go, 7 inch vinyl,
There you go.
all the way back to him. And as a result of that, McCartney became the head of um the
Patron.
chair
Yeah.
patron, that's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for, of the followers of Rupert Bear, the official Rupert Bear Society for a year.
We have not joined that. I'd like to point it out to any listeners accusing me and Alan of joining that. We have not, in fact, joined that. Yeah.
You don't need to. They've got a lovely website that is exactly how you'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a lot of people with a lot of time in their hands who have a lot of thought back in it, um, who are clearly the people that still buy the annual today.
Yeah. Yeah.
The and so there's this whole thing about going, this is the society of the history, and it maintains everything, but there make sure that there's a calendar and all this sort of stuff. And he was the patron of that briefly, and Giles Brandreth has been the patron of it. Giles Brandreth has a big collection of teddy bears, or had that.
Yeah. He opened the Teddy Bear Museum, I'm going to say something like that,
Most
didn't
of
he?
his teddy bears that feed into that.
Yeah.
And again, obviously he's big into his use of wordplay and all this sort of stuff. So that
True.
the
Good point.
fact
Yeah.
you do all the rhyming couplets is really big for him because he's big on poetry and stuff. But all of this is demonstrating that there is this life running through this of people going, this is my nostalgia and this is something I want to hold on to and come with it. Now that's not without flaws, because there are bits of these books that we've flicked through, or I've certainly some of the 70s ones that I've flicked through, where you do have to say there's characters that appeared then that would not appear now,
Yes. Yeah.
in the same way that Robinson's Jam has changed its advertising.
Yeah. And I think it's not. I'll say it's not limited to just the Gollywog character in
No.
it. There are a lot of stereotypes that we wouldn't go anywhere near today, and we for the right reasons, especially people from China, etc.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Where it's very much, even down to some of the name choices with regards to his friends, where you can say, or his friend who happens to be a Pekingese dog,
Yeah. You're going to say it?
and this, well, yeah, I was going to say, so you've got Bill Badger, sorry, Algie Pug, Porgy Pig, and Ping Pong the Pekingese. You're
No,
kind of
it's
going,
Pong Ping.
sorry, it's Pong Ping.
Yeah, that's what I was laughing at, because I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, you have got no Little Britain on you there for a second.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was just thinking about. Yeah, but the thing is that Bestell, he's stuck in his little house. He's a lonely dude. He's thinking, what should I call him? Oh, God bless him. Do you know what I mean? He means well. Yeah.
As I say, well, you can't say it wasn't acceptable, or it was acceptable in the 1950s, but it's a case of it. That's what it was then.
Yeah.
That's,
It's happened. Yeah.
The world's everything moves on, and people learn and change and stuff. So there are issues with it. Going back to that, talking about the whole thing as well, though, in terms of
I wonder whether I might just interject there, mate, if you don't mind, just a little bit more about the McCartney song,
yeah,
unless you're going to go back to it.
no,
But
no,
so in it, he opens his book. Rupert goes on a walk. He says goodbye to his parents, and he heads off into this place, and he watches the frog chorus form. And this is the thing that only happens every so many hundreds of years or something. And they start singing, and it's a very catchy cartoon, typical of the period, top of the pops hit record. It's released through Parlophone and produced by, believe it or not, George Martin. The single came out after McCartney's No More Lonely Nights, if you remember that, which I kind of dug that song. I kind of quite like that song. It hit number 3 in the charts, which back then was a massive deal. You're making you're buying a house off the back of that, you know. Paul didn't think much of it apparently until Martin laid the arrangement over the top of it, and I think I've got a feeling a lot of what we hear, the building orchestra and maybe some of the touches in it are Martin more than McCartney. It was claimed it was meant to be the pilot for a new movie series that never got picked up, and it was animated, or the initial animation was started by a friend of Paul's called Jeff Dunbar, who really does get the mood. I was really impressed with how like the annuals it is. Everything is design wise spot on compared to the annuals and the comic strips. Do you think, is that something you'd agree with?
yeah, let's say so. And look, the Rupert animated series that were done, all of them were good. I mean, I've not looked at any of the new stuff where it's
Yeah,
a little bit more stop motion in terms of its approach, but the certainly the animated stuff,
it's got that innocence feel to it. I think is what I like. Yeah,
and it has that ability again to, because it's animation, because it's comics, you can go anywhere and do.
yeah. It takes advantage of that. It does the right thing, doesn't it? There's no talking around a coffee table for 45 minutes. But also novelised. It was novelised by Ladybird Books, as everything was back then. Everything seemed to have a novelisation version of it. It got released on VHS, which back in the day was quite an expensive deal. I remember when Michael Jackson's, what's the one where he turns into a werewolf? Is that Thriller? That one. When that came out, that was like 30 odd quid to buy a tape. I remember somebody in at school had a copy of it. The VHS came out with a couple more songs from Linda McCartney, never a high point in Beatles lore, God bless her. And it was inspired by the 1958 Rupert story, Rupert and the Water Lily. Paul actually wrote 11 songs for the proposed movie that were never used. And in 2009, Terry Wogan and friends released their own version of it, believe it or not. And my last fact from the McCartney song is Windsor Davis, June Whitfield and Paul McCartney were the cast. How's that? That's right, isn't it?
And it won a BAFTA.
Oh, did it? I didn't realise that. Oh, nice.
The BAFTA 1984 for Best Animated Short Film.
Yeah. We'll touch on some of the other versions, like you just touched on. There's been a multitude of TV series in different ways. There was a black and white one, which I think is the one I remember. Jackie Lee's version was the one that brought back so many of the memories for me. He's Rupert the Bear. That song, really evocative of the period.
Yeah, so I think that song came out before the animated series at all.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, and because again, it was the well-known characters. Everybody, and you're going to come up with a song, so let's sing about characters everybody knows. Yep. And then that song was then used as part of the late 70s animated series that, or the early 70s. Sorry, I'm saying late 70s. Late 70s is when I watched it.
Right.
It first started in 1970.
Okay.
For ITV. Oh my gosh, there's 156 10-minute episodes.
Bloody hell.
Episodes of the
Take that, manga.
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, actually, that's probably an interesting crossover. But so it's and that again, that theme song reached number 14 in the UK charts in 1971. I mean, you consider that selling singles at that point in time was a big thing. Again, it's about the fact that the character is ingrained in society in terms of how we know it and who he is. I say that the flaw there is that she does call him Rupert the Bear throughout, and therefore
sacrilege.
Rupert the Bear.
Yeah.
Which is the thing from that. But yeah, so you're right. There was that. Then there's been new series that ran in the mid 80s, again in the early 90s, and Follow the Magic, I think, has been the most recent one.
Yes. Yeah. But you've spotted him in a couple of other places, Al, as well, haven't you?
I have. Well, and this is where there's a weird, interesting thing, because there's an image that I saw in the 1976 annual that I said to you, is it any wonder if I saw that aged 5 that I didn't go on to love Michael Kaluta?
Yeah, because people listen to previous episodes, they know what a massive fan of Kaluta you are, and
if
you know him. Yeah.
A dragon sitting on top of a clock that's drawn in this style, and I'll put it into the Slack and everything later.
Cool.
You would say, you would probably go, maybe that's Kaluta, and you said, or it's Charles Vess.
Yeah.
Which reminded me.
I think that was my subconscious giving me a knock on the door around that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it reminded me that if you go to the DC's original miniseries, Books of Magic, now
it's not Harry Potter, that one. Don't say that. You're not allowed to by legal reasons. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It's written by your friend Neil Gaiman, who is actually a Rupert fan. Again.
Oh right, I didn't know that. Okay.
He's the one. He actually was the one that encouraged this as well. There's in the middle of that series has multiple artists involved in it. I think it's the 3rd issue is Charles Vess that actually draws it, and as part of that, they visit the fairy market.
Yeah,
which is again, this is a double page spread of the Tim Hunter. I want to say off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, yeah.
It's been taken through the various worlds of magic, and he ends up in the fairy world, and he ends up going to the market by that. And there's lots of little things happening in the background. This is just one of these really detailed spreads of just a big marketplace, and just at one of the stalls, completely unmentioned, completely not drawn any attention to at all. You have the teacher, who is the old goat, with Rupert, talking to each other, clearly trying to buy something off one of the market stalls.
Yeah.
And you're like going, that is Charles Vess has put that in there.
Yeah.
Now, what that then led me to do was read up about Charles Vess, who actually calls out Bestell as one of his inspirations.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, and this is where it gets really crazy, if you go to, and these are books I don't think I ever owned, and I knew they all existed, but I never, thought about them for a long time.
Okay.
Amazing Heroes swimsuit specials.
Like you didn't own it. Yeah.
Right? So and here's the thing, I think it's issue 4, or it could be issue 5. Yeah, it has Omaha the cat dancer.
Wow. Oh, that's a sacrilegious combination.
Right?
Yeah.
That's on the cover. But page 1 of that. So these books were swimsuit specials. Basically, it was a collection of the famous comic characters at the time drawn in swimsuits. That's all it was, right? Done by the great and the good, and it's anybody who's anybody appeared in one of these books in terms of drawing stuff. But Charles Vess did a page in that, and it's a splash page, and it's a collection of. It's got that he does. He's got Raggy Ann, he's got Huey, Louie, and Dewey, and various others.
Tintin.
And as part of that image is Rupert Bear in swimming trunks that happen to be with the check on them as well, which I think was really awesome. And you're kind of going, what an amazing throwaway thing to go. Yeah, I'm going to put this in here and
what a great commission that would make, Al, as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that, so again, it's that weird, and again, it's that juxtaposition of going Omaha Cat Dancer on the cover, Rupert Bear on the inside. But yeah, so that's where we found it with Charles Vess.
Yeah.
And then again, certain people obviously want to call out their recognition of the character. I believe the character is known as H9.
Oh, okay.
In the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Of course. Yeah.
Again, it is Rupert Bear is the long shot. It was anamorphic bear created by Dr. Maroon.
Yes, it's in that sequence, isn't it? Yeah, I forgot now. Yeah.
It's clearly that's more. It's almost the zombified version of Rupert, but
yeah,
it's all these little things where you just see the character just appear in little places just for the.
It's part of our national memory, isn't it? It's institutional memory almost. It's like you also notice. You also brought up he's on the front of I forget the name of the David Roach book now. He's on the cover.
Masters of UK Art.
Yeah, British. That's it. Which me and Rich Sheaf talked about. a couple of years ago on here.
Yeah.
He's
So,
also on. I spotted him on the King Crimson Lizard LP cover, flying a little plane. It's just this sort of. He's almost like so uncool. He's cool to put somewhere. I feel a bit like that. It's almost like he's ironically middle class. That's a terrible thing to say, but there's something there about he's classless, but there is a class to people who read him. Is there? I don't know.
Yes, I think that is, and he's a bit more Blue Peter than Tiz was.
Yeah, I think that's fair, man. Yeah, I think you're right.
Because and as you know, you're saying who reads it today, or what would you do with these things today?
Yeah.
I still think that the way that the book is set out, it is an amazing way of actually teaching people or kids to read, because it is on these three layers of going. You can look at the pictures and you can understand the story. You can read the rhyming couplets to get yourself along a little bit more with the story, and they're quite short and simple. And if you're learning to read, the fact that you know that the last word of each sentence sounds the same, it actually helps with your reading. You know,
that's a good point, actually. I mean, we had a discussion about how it's designed to be read to children.
Yeah,
as opposed
and
to
then I was going to say, then the bottom bit's the full story thing, which I think is, you're right, that's where it's reading to.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I remember picking it up as a kid and not bothering reading the bottom bits of it. Yeah, because I was lazy. Yeah,
but some of the pictures are just beautiful to look at, and even the modern stuff. I don't have any of the most recent piece. With the current artist is, lost his name for a second.
I've got it here. Bear with me.
Stuart Trotter.
Let's give a shout out to the artists who followed Bestell. So we had Alex Cuby art, 75, 78. We had John Harold and Gina Hart on colours, and they took it through the 70s and kind of re-established him, I think, I'm going to say, back into that groove. And then we've got Stuart Trotter. I like to call him the newest artist on him, who's been drawing him since 2008. But if you hear any interviews with him, God bless him, Stuart is in his 60s, so it's not really the Young Guns special for Marvel. You know, it's not really that. But, other writers have included Freddie Chaplin, 65 to 78, James Henderson, 78 and 90, Ian Robinson, 90 to 2002, and Stuart Trotter writes it himself as well, in the same way that Bestell did. He draws and writes it at the moment. Yeah, there's been some great people on it, I think.
But
good.
Yeah, so all I will say is, and I think you felt this as well, is that I kind of suggested this topic as a little bit of a joke. But it's dragged up some things.
Man, you said to me, why don't we do Rupert? And I thought, that's easy. That'd take a couple of days of research. And then all we have done for the last 2 weeks is said, have you seen this? What about this? It's almost like that,
just
isn't it?
Things going, this has put me, or it's put me in places in my head to go, I remember being there, and our friends at That Comic Smell, you say that old thing, sometimes the smell of it brings you back to whatever. But it's that there's, as I say, there's been images here where I'm like going, oh yeah, I was in that house at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it suddenly is just put me there. Or as you say, going back to the frog chorus and going, oh yeah, I was sat in front of that type of television at that point.
Yeah, man, totally. I mean, I honestly can remember sitting there with an annual in my lap in front of my grand's, 4-bar heater in the winter in Wembley. It's to that point. It's not comfort reading because I don't tend to dive in and read it every so often. I know some people do. Mark Radcliffe talked about that, didn't he, in the BBC Sounds documentary we listened to, where he said he reads it, it gets him out of the way of the family every Boxing Day. And I'm sure Giles Brandreth, reads it every night before he goes to bed with his long johns on. But
I wouldn't do that to me. And it is, but it has just been I'd forgotten some of it. This has brought me back to my childhood in big ways.
Yeah.
And
as men of quite a few years, I think that's a hard pressed job to do, it. I can barely remember who I met last week.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see in what would be, you and I probably won't get to listen to this, but whatever the equivalent of a hologram stand-up thing for a podcast is in 2050 or 2060. Where somebody goes, oh yeah, I remember reading this, or remember this thing from 2024.
Yeah.
Going, it takes me right back,
And And God bless American listeners. I love you, but I make no apologies for talking about this. Go and look it up. You know, and it's like that, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, but this is the thing. It's
It's quintessentially British, isn't it?
It's
no two ways
very,
about it.
very British in terms of it. And arguably, I would say very, very English as well. But that's...
Do you think so? That's interesting you say that, because bear in mind, part of it was written in Wales, or big chunks of it were created in Wales.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I see what you mean. I think because you guys have got your own, you've got Outdoor Willie and the Bruins and you know that sort of thing, haven't you? Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe.
And maybe that's and maybe it's just in my head with the. If you ask me what accent he had.
So he's got a clipped BBC accent.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
But getting nothing wrong with that. It's just that that's where I see it stemming. But certainly, I would recommend people to go hunting out some of the artwork from Bestell, go out from Kubi as well in terms of that sort of range.
You can still pick it up. There's a Facebook group, the art of. I found it the other day. The art of Alfred Bestell. Sorry, mate.
The actual annuals themselves cost nothing.
Yeah, even the new ones are only £4 or something. Yeah.
And if you're in any charity shop, you'll probably find one. And it's worth picking up and just having a flick to go. That's fine. And if you happen to have anybody in your family in the age bracket of 5 through 10, depending on their, as a means by which to help them read and just get into comics first time round, why not?
Or just copy them and draw, and there's for those who've heard this and want a bit of nostalgia hit and think this is something I think I need to get back, have a look at and maybe preserve. There's Rupert, a celebration of favourite stories, 100 years of Rupert the Bear, 1920 to 2020. It's come out. It's still available now from Farshore Publishing. It's a tiny bit more expensive. It's £30, but it's a beautiful book. It really is a lovely book. Yeah, foil stamp cover, that sort of thing.
I picked up 4 annuals off eBay for less than a tenner.
Yeah.
That's and to that end, I really do need to say thank you to David Walker and Philip Anthony Knowles.
I like the way they put their middle name in there. That's good.
Yes. Yeah. Both of whom owned the books originally because they have signed the books with their names in the "This book belongs to."
I was always writing my name in things like that, man. I was terrible for that. Yeah, we didn't know the worth in our hands, did we?
No.
And that one day we'll be eBay millionaires. But yeah, thanks for that, Al. That was a good one, mate. That was as you said, it was surprisingly interesting, I suppose is the way to say it. We really got caught up in it, didn't we? Yeah,
we did. Yeah,
good stuff. Yeah. Excellent, Al. Okay, so where can we find you? Is there anything you personally want to pimp or anything you want to mention on the way?
So creatively, no. The Penguin is now in circulation or syndication, I should say.
I saw that. Yeah. You're going to be like Star Trek. It's because it's going to take off again.
Well, yeah. So it was quite funny. I posted something to Instagram the other day, and somebody went, "Oh, it really feels like you're never going to give up." And I was like, "You're reading something from 7 years ago that's
still fresh."
It's it might be new to you. It's not new to me.
We're still reading Calvin and Hobbes.
Exactly. So it's if you want to continue to read any of the Penguin, and just search at Penguin on just about any form of social media. I'm not on them all, but I'll let you find out which ones I am.
There'll be a different one if someone listens to this in a few weeks' time. There'll be another one anyway.
Anyone?
Yeah. You're right.
Well, your choice of social media. Try and find at Penguin.
Good man. You can find this podcast along with a little column I do every Wednesday morning. So there's one coming out tomorrow as we record about the best thing I've read and then the worst thing I've read of the week, along with some updates. I'm going to be at Charlotte. I'm going to be in Charlotte. I only say that to Tom Stewart maybe say it. I'm going to be in Charlotte next week at the Heroes Con. So come and find me. I'll be there with our buddy Cliff Cumber. And then on the 20th of July, it's Qvention 2 rather. So there'll be some details of that coming out soon as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks, Al. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.